Hello, this is Pixelated Playgrounds, a monthly gaming book club podcast discussing the art and craft of video games. I'm Bryan Skirsha.
I'm Josh Galecki.
And I'm Clint Jones.
And this month, we're talking about Celeste, a platformer about climbing up a mountain by Canadian video game developers Matt Thorsten and Joel Berry. This guy came out in January 2018 on Microsoft Windows, Nintendo Switch, PS4, Xbox One. This is a really cool game, captured a lot of hearts and minds in 2018, winning awards, and I really enjoyed it. What do you guys think?
I had a lot of fun with this game. I thought it was a very tight platformer, very focused, which, when you're talking about a platformer, that's one of the things you're looking at. You have real good controls. You're able to feel like it's a fair game. How about you, Clint?
To say I liked it would be tough, but it was a good game. You guys all played this on Switch, right?
That's right.
I did.
As a whole, it was a great experience. It was just, this has been the theme lately, but it was beyond difficult. This was like life-alteringly hard. Like, I wanted to quit this game so many times. It's part of the theme of the game, actually, if you really think about it, but
it totally is. That's a good point, and that was actually one of the reasons I suggested this game. Is after we talked about Sekiro for long and hard, and it made me think about other hard games, and Celeste came to mind. I played it, and I thought, on top of being a relatively breezy game, this generally clocks in at 5 hours. Although Clint, maybe you have something to say about that.
Took me 9.
Wow.
That's okay.
I don't mean to condescend.
We're not discriminating. We're not like we're so hardcore here.
No, absolutely not.
I didn't have a Super Nintendo when I was a kid, guys, so I missed this whole get good at platformers thing. I kind of came in right around GoldenEye, so I missed all the Super Mario, and I'm paying for it now. But that's okay.
Clint, now I've looked at your flavor of games from the ones you selected, and they definitely seem to be more FPS-centric. You'd say you grew up more on the FPS than the platformers?
For sure. Yep. So I came in right at N64 time, so that was GoldenEye, and that was Ocarina of Time.
So good.
Yeah,
Perfect
all
Dark,
those games. That's why I love RPGs and I love first-person shooters. That was the genre that I kind of came in on. Everything else was just at my friend's house whenever I could.
People bring a lot of different things to these games, and on top of the fact that it's relatively breezy and had a lot of critical success, like we said, this game did have a lot of sort of important things to say about mental health, and that'll come out when we talk a little bit more about the message of this game and what the developers intended for it. Speaking of those guys, the developers, Matt Thorsten and Joel Berry, basically prototype this game over a game jam. This seems to be like a theme of our indie games. They go out, they prototype stuff, pick one they love, and stick with it, right?
Well, I feel part of that is almost a survivor bias. A lot of people try things out at game jams, and a lot of stuff doesn't work for those. A game jam, for those of you who haven't heard of it before, it's where some organization sets a theme, say like Small Worlds or Take This, You'll Need It, or whatever theme it is, and then you have 48 hours or 72 hours or a week or whatever to come up with a quote-unquote complete game. And obviously the games that start off over here are more prototypes than finished games, but you do see a lot of experimentation in them, and the more successful experiments are more likely to get made into good games afterwards.
Yeah, kind of like Hollow Knight. Same kind of story. And
that's right.
Another great experience. Another very hard, but really good experience that I'm glad I did, but not necessarily while I was playing it.
You know what? We need to take a step back and play a nice, easy game.
Seriously.
Like Cadence of Hyrule, right?
Oh, God. All right.
That.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to this, but you'll hit a curve in that where eventually it becomes a lot easier. But anyway, this game is basically about a girl who's at a point in her life where she just needs to climb a mountain. Madeline is the name of the protagonist of this story. She tries to reach the summit of Mount Celeste, and she, on the course of her way up this mountain climbing it, is pursued by sort of her pessimistic side of her personality that's made real by the magic of the mountain.
Yeah, and it deals a lot with personal themes like anxiety and things like that. And then just how do you deal with that part of you, which truly, this is probably the best story in a platformer I've ever seen. and it's really simple in the way it's told, and it's kind of it's very minimalist too, but it's really effective, and I really enjoyed it.
I think the game is very effective at telling that story in a way that something like go save the princess in this castle is not. The mountain is very much kind of a metaphor within that. You have to climb that, but also at the same time, Madeline's climbing this mountain. She's also coming to terms with herself and with this part of her that at first is very threatening, chasing after her, seems to be foiling her at every moment. And there's a couple points in the game where it's not explicit, but implicitly, Madeline is blaming her problems and the state that she's in on this external avatar of herself, this part of herself. But she's able to progress and actually climb the mountain once she comes to peace with that side of herself. Once she accepts that and grows because of it, she's able to complete the task she originally set out on. I thought it was a very mature handling of themes that might not have been handled very well in terms of mental problems, mental illnesses, and things like that.
Yeah, it's not something you see tackled in games too often, honestly, and we're poorer for it. I think these are the types of topics that should be explored more often, especially because they're so much more relatable than something like you said, saving the princess. Not all of us are saving princesses every day, but everybody deals with a little bit of anxiety here and there, no matter what they're doing every single day. And this game, like you said, it has character arcs that really perfectly portray that. Madeline and her dark, side. I'll call her Badeline.
I think that's what the internet has been taken to calling her, is Badeline.
That's right. So Madeline and Badeline. But you, the way that they interact and the way their character and relationship arc evolves throughout the game really does speak to a person who's just trying to tackle a very personal problem. And like you said, the metaphor here really shines through with mountain climbing.
Yeah, it's kind of funny too. This game's all about anxiety and getting over your little fears. And you guys know this, but the people on the podcast don't. I was in a near plane crash 5-6 years ago, and I get crazy anxiety attacks every time I have to get on a plane. It's gotten a lot more manageable now, but man, it used to be terrible. But I actually had to be on 8 flights over the past 2 weeks because I've been going out for new hire training with my new job. And kind of had a couple freak out moments on the plane, and actually playing this game helped me get through that. And it was kind of funny, like the parallels, like I'm having an anxiety attack, this girl's dealing with her anxiety, I'm just trying to get through it, and I'm like, hey, this actually kind of ties in. It was kind of a cool little personal moment with that game too.
Yeah, that's wild. How often do you get to bring something that you're working through in a game to your actual real life? That is neat.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's what games should be aiming for, right? Like they should be aiming to, not necessarily that they set out to help people through something specific, but that they should end up doing that is definitely, I feel like a book or a movie or anything else.
This game in particular, I think, was aiming for that. These creators clearly had a message. They wanted to talk to people that struggled with anxiety, depression, etc. And I think, as far as we're concerned, they succeeded in that goal.
Oh, for sure.
They told a very good story with it. One little mechanical twist, while we're on the topic of Badeline right here, that I thought was really good was the first time you were introduced to her, when you're going up to the mirror in the spooky ruins and the mirror cracks and she appears there right in front of you. She's chasing you around after that for the rest of the level, but she's following the same path you set. She's following the path you're taking, just a few seconds behind. And besides being an interesting platforming mechanic in terms of you have to dodge the space you are at 5 or 10 seconds ago, or however that is, it's also kind of speaking to how, with anxiety, a lot of the times what people do when they have a general anxiety disorder is they reflect a lot on the things they did in the past. They reflect on those things and they're thinking like, this isn't good for me to have done, I shouldn't have done that. And having that explicitly portrayed in the game mechanics where you're sort of reflecting, you're seeing the things you used to do, that was a very interesting twist for me. I thought it was a really nice touch by them.
Yeah, you're talking about the chase sequences that sort of make up some of the boss encounters, or boss quote-unquote encounters that you have in this game. And they're really interesting sequences because, this game is sort of broken down into a few different types of level, basically. Each screen is basically a level, and you make your way through them, traversing them, running, jumping, climbing, and dashing. Those are your sort of main verbs that you have in this game. Over the course of the game, you are trying to figure out different approaches, conquering different mechanics that the game is continually introducing. A conglomeration of screens sort of makes up a larger level, which in turn, the levels make up the sort of overall story of Madeline climbing this mountain. It's sort of a story told fractally. It keeps breaking down into smaller and smaller stories as you get into the individual screens being sort of individual stories for how Madeline overcomes a given obstacle.
I was going to say, yeah, that's definitely how they checkpoint everything, too. Everything is, you beat the screen, okay, cool. Now you can move on to the next one, and if you die, you go back to the beginning of the screen. There's no, level at large. Everything is its own little tiny individual challenge, and we've talked about this before, but I think that lends itself really well to the Switch. You can pick it up, you play one screen, cool, that might have taken you 10 minutes, or 20 like it did for me, to get through that one little screen, but once you're done, you move on to the next part, and you go from there.
I think one of the interesting things about this was you could focus on pulling off a very tight and controlled combo, so to speak, that might only be 4 or 5 moves long, but gets you to the next checkpoint, to the next save point, and you're good to go from there.
Yeah, I think that's a really important part, that immediate restart. Some of these games that are extremely hard like this, if you get met with a loading screen every time, that just kills it. But I'm thinking games like Super Meat Boy, obviously Celeste, Hotline Miami, things like that where when, you die 1,000 times, doesn't matter, boom, you're right back in the action, you can go again. That makes it a lot more palatable.
Oh, totally. And, I think this game starts to get a little bit more friction heavy when you get to those longer sequences that you're being asked to master. The boss fights in particular, the longer they make the screen you're being asked to tackle,
the more frustrating it gets.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. It's like that time tax you were talking about. I felt it real bad in this game, especially on the bosses, and I want to bring that up real quick. That was by far the low point of the game. I fucking hated the bosses, especially the final boss, which should have been a really cool moment. I felt like it was taking forever, and then there was a moment where I thought it was over, and then it restarted all over again. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Didn't we have enough of this? It was just stupid. I get it. The last boss has to be the most,
You're talking about when you're working with, or you're trying to confront Madeline.
Correct. You're trying to catch her this time. Instead of her catching you, you're chasing her. You're chasing her, so you can
that was
confront
hard
it.
Sequence.
Yeah, but it just hard is fine, but it was just never ending. I was like, dude, we freaking get it. Just be done with it. I'm ready to move on.
Yeah, this game, like we were just saying, 98% of the checkpointing is really good, and then and the creators have come out and said this is meant to be a challenging game, and they did a lot of things to sort of mitigate that for people that just want to get through and see the story. But at the end of the day, they had a vision for a challenging game, and they succeeded in making it fucking challenging at parts.
Oh yeah, well that's okay. Again, it's almost paralleling to itself. If it wasn't hard, if the climb wasn't hard, you wouldn't be any better for having done it. It's about perseverance and telling yourself you can do something until you get it done, and the game was the exact same way.
Well, that's the point of difficulty, right? You climb the mountain not because it's a walk in the park, but because you're climbing a mountain.
To prove you can, to yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a lot like actual rock climbing and bouldering. You set the difficulty yourself, and there's other challenges this game incorporates, like the strawberries, the B-sides, all kinds of additional things this game adds in. But there are hard routes and easy routes in rock climbing and bouldering as well, and you're sort of tasked with determining what you can, take from that, and choosing to chart your path accordingly. And I don't know if you guys ever did any rock climbing, but I had access to a really good rock climbing wall in college at the Ohio State University's Adventure Recreation Center. That's
a mouthful right there.
Yeah, it was fun. So you guys know, I think at least you, Josh, know Elliot. Our buddy Elliot, he and I used to go rock climbing every Thursday. And the thing about rock climbing is, each person with their, body type and such has a different advantage. Just like in this game, there's multiple ways to chart a course through a given screen. So Elliot was shorter but stronger than I was. I was taller than he was, but I couldn't scrunch my body into smaller places without falling off the side of the thing. So, just like that, different people will take different approaches to different rooms depending on what they're bringing to the situation.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the ways they adjusted difficulty within this game, because it was much more thought out maybe than some other games have been. You could go through the level, you could go through the screens and just make your way through the level, but there were other things you could do on top of that. There were strawberries that you could collect, little collectibles, and they tell you the only thing this does is it's going to impress your friends later on, but doesn't do anything else. But you would have to go through more particular platforming challenges in order to get these strawberries. Doesn't advance the story at all or anything like that.
Yep, when I saw the strawberries, I went the other way. I was like, nope, not this screen. I'm going the other direction.
Usually I'd try maybe 3-4 times, and if I could understand the screen and think, okay, I know what I got to do to get this, then I'd go for it. But if I was confused about what I was supposed to do, which didn't happen very often. I thought they had a very intelligent level design in terms of letting you know where you were supposed to go. It didn't happen very often, but if I was confused about a strawberry, I just left it. I didn't feel bad about it.
Yeah, I didn't get... I think I maybe ended with a third of the strawberries or something like that my first time through. And like you said, I got the ones that are mostly happy path. There's some that are just asking quite a bit of you. And like you said, they say right up front that there's no mechanical payoff for them. So it was pretty easy for me to just opt out of that.
Sure. Well, you also mentioned that there's other ways that this game will help you tackle some of that difficulty. Did any of you guys end up using assist mode?
I didn't, but I really appreciate that it's there. I actually, I've read a lot about the various options that they included here, and I liked the way they presented assist mode in this game so much that I wanted to just read what it says when you go to assist mode, because I think this is how difficulty should be handled by a game.
Oh, what's it say?
Yeah, so when you go to assist mode, it says, assist mode allows you to modify the game rules to reduce its difficulty. Celeste was designed to be a challenging but accessible game. We believe difficulty is essential to the experience. We recommend you play this without assist mode for the first time. However, we understand that each player is different. If Celeste is inaccessible to you due to its difficulty, we hope that assist mode will allow you to still enjoy it. Mwah, perfect. Not insulting, not condescending, just accepting of what you're bringing there. If you need to do it, go for it.
Yeah, I was very happy that I never turned it on. There was about 100 times where I'm like, I'm going to do it. And then I'd get out of there, I'm like, nah, I'm not going to do it. I was so close, especially when I got to the mountain at the end, where the checkpointing for once was actually perfect. I felt like the checkpointing, once you got to the mountain, was
the summit,
the way it should have been the whole game. It was very bite-sized, where the rest of the game was just, most of it was good, but there's some screens that was just holy crap, you felt like you had to do 12 different moves in perfect sequence to get it to work right.
The summit was a really good sort of end test for the game, and I think it put on display the game's strengths in a perfect way. Like you said, it was checkpointed well. There wasn't any friction with a boss battle. And while this game succeeded so much in telling its story through the variation with the boss battles and things, they did, like we talked about, add that bit of friction when they were asking you to sort of make a big heave to get that big emotional payoff. So yeah.
I mean, it worked. It worked, but it frustrated the hell out of me, and I think it could have been handled a lot better. It was really cool, too, how we talked about there's a ton of level variation. So I think there was, 7 different areas in the game, main areas, and each one introduced its own mechanic that was only in that particular setting, right? It didn't repeat later. But the cool thing is, and I'm sure we're past spoilers at this point, but there's a point where you literally fall to the bottom of the mountain and you tell yourself, I can't ever get back up. Everybody falls down. That was another... There were so many good, little nuggets in there. Everybody falls down, but it's how you handle it and do you get back up. And the other one was you can't help people that don't want to be helped. Don't... Like Mr. Oshiro, you can't get hung up on other people's problems. If they don't want to be helped, you can't do anything about it. You have to let people heal on their own time. It had, all these, cool little life lessons, which I loved throughout the whole game. And they didn't, put it right in your face, but they, drew you right to it, which I really loved. But anyway... You go to the bottom, and you're convincing yourself to go back up, and you like hit a little piece of every, without it being too much, you hit a little piece of every setting on the way back up. And they kind of did the same thing again on the summit, but not to the degree that they did in that in the last climb. And I really liked how it's like putting a little bow on it right at the end.
It was very well put together. The climax of the game really hit home, and it felt like you reviewed the journey you went on very well. I'm kind of reminded of, in musical theater, you have the whole reprise at the end where you go through every song and melody that you had before. A bit of a trope over there. And I don't think it does a job very well, but what it did, the reprise of the mechanics, it drew the point home.
Yeah, I completely agree, and like you said, it coming right after the plot beat where you and Madeline and Badeline sort of have their confrontation, and they sort of reconcile their differences, and the fact that they're working together and you actually get a little level up when they sort of combine their powers and then they start making their way back up the mountain, I thought was poignant in a weird sort of like nerdy tropey way. It really hit home for me.
Well, it's a good example of how you can use mechanics to show the narrative, to display the narrative. Like, you come to terms with this other part of yourself, this part you've blamed for all of your problems before, but you realize it's not just like an enemy right there. It's not just an antagonist. It's something you can draw strength from, something you can draw power from, and you do that and you get a new ability. You can do this double dash sort of thing in the game now. You can reach places you couldn't go before because you are at peace with yourself. You're more of a whole instead of in conflict with yourself.
Yeah. Speaking of this narrative, how did you guys feel about the quote-unquote voice acting in here? So obviously there's no voices. You only get like it's almost like an anime face, and then these weird little squeaking sounds, which I'm sure will queue up right here. But I thought that as simple and as weird as it was, it like perfectly displayed emotion. Like you could tell, like almost like the quivering lip, like, or I'm afraid, like it conveyed so much emotion in such a weird little package. Like it was really cool. I really liked how they did it. What'd you guys think?
I liked it too. It reminded me of Banjo-Kazooie, which is another game that sort of used the sort of gibberish voice acting to great effect. And, you know, each character has their own brand of gibberish, and, you know, real voice actors are expensive too. So, like, I totally get why they did this, but they did it well.
I liked it better without, because you could almost imagine their voice the way you wanted, and it still conveyed all the emotion. Like, it was amazing. Without saying words, you got all the emotion, and you could imagine it. It was almost like you're still reading a book almost. You're still doing it your way, but you get the point.
It's giving you a hint to what this character should sound like without prescribing it directly.
I think it was cartoonish in a way, sort of like the visuals were, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Compared to Banjo-Kazooie, this game definitely did a much better job. I'm thinking in particular of Madeline, how she would sound when she was being sarcastic to Theo. Versus when she was being anxious and afraid. And the sound effects, as maybe primitive as they were compared to a voice actor, captured the essence of that perfectly. I was very satisfied with it.
Yeah, it's probably worth talking about a couple of these characters because, you know, Madeline on her way up the mountain does encounter a few characters that have pretty satisfying arcs in their own. Theo is the first one you encounter. He's sort of a budding Instagram. What's he called?
Influencer.
Yeah, influencer.
Basically, he doesn't know what to do with his life.
Those millennials.
God damn it.
Yeah,
those kids.
Yeah, so you meet him right in the first level, the Forsaken City. He's on a trip to take photos, and he's from Seattle. So, yeah, draw your own conclusions with what they're trying to portray that way. But he's an endearing character, too. He has a pretty good arc where he, at the end of it, starts to realize, especially when you get to the later levels, like the Mirror Temple, that he's sort of being trapped by this expectation that the social media is placing on him and his life. And that's why all the eyes are on him.
I liked the Mirror Temple, the part where it made explicit their fears or failings, however you have it. I did not like the Mirror Temple for the monsters inside of it.
No. Anytime something was chasing you, this game pissed me off. Like, it's already hard enough. Don't make things chase me while I'm already trying to do the impossible.
It's not like it requires any less of mechanical precision when you're being chased, as opposed to some of the other things they're asking you to do. But just thematically, my favorite levels were the ones where you didn't have those things chasing you. Like, I think, what was it called? Reflections, the one after you fall down out of the ski lift or whatever it is. That was one of my favorite levels. The summit's pretty close right after that, but I felt like those were... It's not like they're asking you to have any less skill. It's just a different feeling when something's coming after you as opposed to when it isn't.
Yeah. And getting back to the characters a little bit too, like, it's worth noting that every single character that you hit going on the way up the mountain has their own little problem. Like, Madeline's got her anxiety and she's got her self-doubt. Theo can't deal with the fact that the people around him are successful and he's not. And he's kind of trapped by, like, he can't keep a job for longer than 2 weeks because he just feels like he can't live up. And then you get to Mr. Oshiro, who's clearly a person that can't move on. Like, the world has passed him by and things have changed and he can't deal with it and he's just stuck in a rut. I don't know what the old lady's problem is. She's just nuts.
She seems kind of zen, honestly. She might just be psycho.
She is the mountain.
She understands the mountain. She's not the mountain, but she understands it. That's why she lives there.
Yeah, but aren't the people that are really happy just in self-delusion?
Yeah, pretty much.
Bryan the cynic speaks up for us all. Thank you.
But I thought it was cool. Like, everybody found a way to deal with their own problems and come out of it better. But they didn't pull the punches like, oh, and everything's fine at the end. Like, no, everybody had to have some self-discovery, and it took some hard hits and some truth to get them there. But it kind of showed that no matter what you're going through, if you just stick with it and keep moving on, things are going to be okay.
But before we, close out this discussion, we really need to talk about this game's soundtrack by Lena Raine, which is pretty fantastic. It's mostly piano and synth, but the way that it sort of layers different tracks throughout the levels and sort of layers in additional features as a level goes on. I'm thinking specifically of the second level, the old site, where you sort of encounter that dreamscape, and it keeps layering different things in until you get into your first chase sequence, and then it sort of goes full bore. I think it's really interesting how Lena was able to sort of build anxiety with her music and sort of bolster the themes of this game.
Yeah, I totally agree. I really like how they, it was very subtle, the whole thing. You never really had to think about what was going on in the soundtrack, but it always helped lend itself to the emotion of the scene.
Yeah, it really was mood music more than anything, and it didn't try and take center stage too much throughout the course of the game, but it set the mood pretty much perfectly. Like, I think Lena really did a fantastic job with that, and this is another one of those put it on while you're studying type of soundtracks,
Oh yeah, like, I never really noticed it until I would notice that I was sitting there bobbing my head like to the jams. I'm like, wait a minute, I didn't even realize I was listening to anything cool, but here it is. It's actually kind of neat.
Yeah, you find yourself, bopping along to it. And I think a lot of elements of this game are like that, like the art of it. It's a simple pixel art aesthetic, but it's like that new sort of sexy pixel art. I call this the Devolver Digital aesthetic because every game they put out looks like this. This game is not by Devolver Digital, though.
That's next month, guys.
Yeah, but it does have a really cool, it looks lo-fi but brand new at the same time. It's a really cool look, and you can tell that it's, it came out last year, but at the same time, it looks like it could come out on the Pico 8, the fake console that this was quote-unquote designed for.
There's been a lot of development in pixel art over the last decade or so. It used to be that that's what the artist had to do, but now when people choose to go with that, they choose that because they want that look, and they can explore the kind of possibilities of pixel art in some greater aspect.
This will always look the way it looks, and it was just an art style. It'll look as good today as it does 20 years from now. It'll still fit. Like this was seen as intended. It wasn't a delimiting factor. Like this was as the artist intended, and I think it'll last longer because of it.
I think that's a very true point. That's one of the things I am against in the whole graphical rat race you got going on with PCs and consoles over there. If your selling point of the game is we have the best graphics and the best visual fidelity, then your selling point is gone in a year because it's no longer the best. Whereas if you have a more abstracted art style, whether it's through pixel art or cartoons or sprite work or whatever it's not something you're selling it. You can have good graphics and a good art style, but it's not like you're no longer the most realistic, the highest fidelity graphics out there. So that's not where you put your development resources.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, the perfect example of this would be like the way Wind Waker's graphics have held up versus Ocarina's or versus Twilight Princess or something.
You know
like
what
that.
my perfect example is? You guys ever see the movie Resident Evil, the first one?
Yeah, I think we watched that drunkenly late at night in college.
That came out 10 years after Terminator 2. And ask yourself which one of those holds up better.
Huh. Interesting. Yeah, I guess to your point, it's really about, like, do you use what you have available to you wisely to execute on your vision versus are you using something for the sake of using it? Anyway, why don't we roll into a few 3-word reviews?
Sure, I'll go first this time. So my 3-word review this time is I hate myself. It was both the theme of the game and the thought I was thinking, like literally every moment I was playing it until the end.
So Clint, thumbs up or thumbs down?
Oddly, thumbs up. So
you heard it here first, folks. Hating yourself. Big thumbs up.
Yeah,
so
love that.
If you guys are looking for the game that just brings home that experience of self-loathing,
this is it. So the story was so heartfelt that I was able to get past the point that this was just like one of the hardest games for me to beat ever. Like we talked about Sekiro before. At least that's my style game. I can work my way through it. I totally missed platforming growing up, so I'm not good at it at all. Hence the 9-hour playtime on this game. But I was determined to get through to the end because the emotional story that they bring you through and the parallels that difficulty brings into that story just made it all worth it. And I loved it, and I hated it. But mainly I hated myself.
All right, my 3-word review for this would be micro-level metaphor. The 2 big things for this would be the micro-levels, the small screen of intense platforming action. It would be complicated, but it would be over quickly, or you get to retry at it very quickly. The game required a certain amount of precision, a very difficult amount of precision in your controls, but in that kind of like instant restart of the last 2 or 3 seconds of what you were trying to do, there was a kind of forgiveness in that as well. But also the metaphor part of it, the second part of that, is because you're climbing the mountain, and you're clearly climbing the mountain, but it's also using that as a metaphor for growing within yourself and accepting yourself for who you are, as opposed to going against yourself, thinking that this part of you shouldn't really be part of you, and you'd be better off without this part, but accepting who you are. So the metaphor of the mountain worked really well as an overarching story arc.
Nice. Yeah, my 3-word review is platformer with heart. I think this is a Obviously, this is a very simple game. People would call it a splatformer, right? You die, you respawn, you try again. It's a platformer at its heart, but it's matched with a heartfelt and touching story that you don't really find in this genre very often. I think that, one, makes this very special, but two, sort of accentuates what the game is bringing in terms of mechanics. This game keeps introducing new things to you over and over again. Collapsing platforms, conveyor belts, moving platforms, the dream blocks I talked about, green bubbles, pink clouds, keys, shattering blocks, smashable walls, spikes, springs, wind. There's just a lot at play here. It's a platformer with a lot of hearts, a lot of guts, and it really says a lot despite saying relatively little in terms of words. So that's why I call this a platformer with heart.
Nice. And I'm assuming you guys were all thumbs up based on what you're saying?
Thumbs
up from me.
That's 6 thumbs up between the 3 of us. Great.
All right. So next month, we're playing Cadence of Hyrule, Crypt of the Necrodancer featuring The Legend of Zelda. Holy shit, that's a mouthful. We'll stick to calling it Cadence of Hyrule.
Much better.
At any rate, for us here at Pixelated Playgrounds, I'm Bryan Skirsha.
I'm Josh Galecki.
And I'm Clint Jones.
Take care and keep on gaming.
So when you first meet Madeline, your alter ego, your pessimistic side of yourself, she tells you you shouldn't go up this mountain because you're really bad at mountain climbing. You're not a mountain climber, you're not a hiker. And you know what? She's right. I died a hell of a lot going up that mountain. So I can't say that that was bad advice at the end of the game.
No, she was right a lot of the times. It wasn't that she was wrong. It was just that
she was a jerk.
Sometimes
I don't even think she was a jerk. She was trying to protect you. She's like, no, you're going to die up here. And hell, I think I had something like 800, 900 deaths.
Oh man, I wish we had our stats. Hold on, can we all get our switches real quick and come right back? It was worse than I thought. 11 hours and 57 minutes with 25 strawberries and 2,413 deaths.
I ended up beating this game at 6 hours and 15 minutes, 81 strawberries, and this is perfect, guys. I am elite, because I have 1,337 deaths.
You did that on purpose.
Not even.
Wow. All right, so I have weird stats because I kept using my same file and played through the game about another half a time, but I'm clocking 8 hours and 1,607 deaths with 39 strawberries, so way less than I thought I got.
I got more than both of you put together.
I got the most playtime and the most deaths.